Macabre Cast.
Devil's on the loose and he's dancing with the mummy.
Join us around Horrorwood and into territory on terror. There's just one way to handle the worcifers and the spoilers, and that's with me, Doc Mark, and Karis, the little mummy, and the smell of Macabre Cast.
Doc Mark and Karis, the little mummy, here to bring you another episode of Macabre Cast, where we'll be dropping R's where they belong and adding them where they don't.
Darling, the only ghoul in the house is you.
So Karis, just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, it isn't. And I don't think it has been since I was 6 when I saw Jaws. But Richard Dreyfuss, Matt Hooper, is returning to the world of shark movies. That's right. He will be the star in a brand new shark movie, and it's called Into the Deep. Well, I got to tell you, Rich, this movie better be good because it's going to be held up against the world's best shark movie to this day, and you were in it. So I hope you're not doing this to make a buck.
Dreyfuss is not one for phoning it in. He always brings his A game. He'll be the best thing about the movie if it is bad. And speaking of phoning it in, we got Horror Chat Matt on the line, and you've got him all riled up about these old-time radio shows you talked about.
Tell me all about it. Let's talk. What could it hurt now? Let's talk. Won't you tell me what is wrong? Yeah. Let's talk.
Hey, Doc Mark and Karis, Horror Chat Matt here. Just finished wrapping up your latest episode, and it was fantastic as always. And you really unlocked a core memory for me at the end of the episode when you started talking about some old-time radio classic shows. I remember being in 6th grade when my friend introduced me to a block of programming on, I believe, RKO out of Boston. Not 100% positive if that was the channel, doesn't really matter. Whatever it was, they would have a couple of times a week a 2-hour block of programming dedicated to old-time radio dramas. They would play a variety of different episodes from comedy, action, adventure, suspense, mystery. Of course, my personal favorite was horror. Some of my other favorites were Superman, the Green Hornet, the Lone Ranger, Dragnet, Jack Benny, the Honeymooners. The Shadow was always great. And of course, on the horror side of things, Suspense, Quiet Place, and Lights Out were always great episodes. We even got so into it that we would try and make our own radio show, which my sister would always interrupt. I would love if I could track down one of those old cassettes just to pop in for a laugh, because that's about all they were good for, but we thought they were great at the time. One of the best things about my job and my hours is that I can wear headphones and I get a lot of listening time. I usually spend the majority of the time listening to podcasts, but after listening to your last episode, I decided to see if I could track down some of these old-time radio shows. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of them still available on Spotify or Amazon Music, wherever you like to get your podcast from. There are tons and tons of old-time radio shows. And there's even people still making newer versions and new episodes of stuff. So I might be giving the podcast a break and checking out some of these old-time shows, or giving these new people a try. Once again, Dark Mark, keep up the great work, and don't touch that dial. Sit back, relax, and listen to some radio classics.
Yes, as I said in the last episode, Matt, I have been collecting old-time radio for a long time. I have whole collections on MP3. I actually started collecting them on cassette, but most of my stuff's on discs with MP3, and I know that you want to have physical copies of things, so check out eBay or even Amazon, because they have whole collections of certain shows, Suspense, Lights Out, that you can get all the episodes on MP3, and they're pretty cheap. And funny you should mention new old-time radio horror and dramas. I have mentioned before that I write, direct, produce, act, and score my own show called Terror. You can find the first 3 episodes on my YouTube channel. And the 4th episode, Everything Happens for a Reason, is still in production, but to be released soon on iTunes.
Constant self-promotion. I wish you yourself constantly plugging things. Terror the radio show, your Dark Mark sings songs, constantly.
You've got to believe in yourself, Karis, or no one will believe in you.
I'm talking about content. I'm talking about interrelationships. I'm talking about God, the devil, hell, heaven. Do you understand? Finally!
Don't give up on us, baby. Don't make the wrong.
In sad news in the horror world, David Soul, who played Ben Mears in 1979's Salem's Lot, probably the best version of that. I don't think they've got it right since. 80 years young. Also singing that song you hear behind me, Don't Give Up on Us, Baby. And probably most famous for his role in the hit TV show Starsky and Hutch. You probably can't even read the book Salem's Lot now without thinking of David Soul for the character of Ben Mears. He surely will be missed. And the director, David Bruckner, who did the reboot of Hellraiser on Hulu, which I did not see because I don't have Hulu. Is that the one with the girl, Pinhead? Does anyone know? Has anyone seen it? Is it worth it? Is going to reboot The Blob, which I get The Blob, the original film, just not the hugest fan, but I'm a huge fan of the reboot in the 80s, which was 100% actual effects, and it was great. If you haven't seen 1988's remake of The Blob, please do. But David Bruckner to reboot The Blob. And I had mentioned before about that Del Toro who made The Shape of Water.
Ew, seriously? That is so gross.
Which I was really disappointed in because it was kind of a remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is one of my favorite classic monsters. I had mentioned before that he's to do Frankenstein, or a mix of Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. I guess that's going to Netflix. This is definitely going to happen. And of course, it's Frankenstein. I'm sure I'll watch it anyway. But I've already heard that it's going to be a handsome Frankenstein. Sounds like another love story. And with that rots from the inside. I mean, of course I'll watch it, but after Shape of Water, which I know everyone was gaga over, I just do not have any faith in Del Toro for this. And we need to, look at the remake of The Invisible Man and how good that was, or if you've seen that reboot of the Wolfman from so many years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was. Shape of Water, yuck.
Hey, tell us how you really feel.
It just doesn't matter! It just doesn't matter! It just doesn't matter!
One thing I like to do every now and then is pick a favorite horror film of mine, one that I have probably analyzed to death and seen hundreds of times, and point certain things out to viewers. And I'm going to mention The Shining, the 1980 Kubrick film. And I want to talk about a particular incident that gets talked about in the film. In the scene where Danny had passed out in the bathroom after seeing a vision of what had happened before and what was to come in the Overlook Hotel. The doctor, the woman doctor, is talking to Wendy in the living room and asks about an accident that Wendy happens to mention, and she goes into the story about how Jack dislocated his shoulder, and then mentions how a good thing came out of it, that he swore to her he'd never drink again. And then she states how it's been 5 months and he hasn't touched a drop. So this sets us up, letting us know that this guy hasn't even been on the wagon for 5 months going into this hotel, and is obviously probably unstable. Now, if you've ever heard or read anything about Kubrick, you know he's a stickler for details. Later in the movie, when Jack is at the bar talking to the ghostly bartender, Lloyd, about the accident, he tells Lloyd that this is something that happened 2 years ago and that she won't let go. So, was Wendy lying? Because she's really not lying to his advantage, saying it's only been 5 months when he's saying it's been 2 years. My take on this is, now I went back to the book also and reread it. Actually, I didn't reread it this time. I listened to the unabridged audio version. So, yes, in the book, it was 2 years ago that he did this to Danny's shoulder, but that is not what made him stop drinking. Another story is told about a wild night out with a friend where they hit something and weren't sure what it was. They did, however, find the mangled remains of a small child's tricycle and were unsure if they had possibly killed a child, which had Jack distraught. And what I gather from the book is that's why he stopped drinking, but not what happened to Danny 2 years prior to that, which doesn't really move the story in any way. And always remember, Kubrick uses the book as a source material, which to this day does a brilliant job, because I love the movie. Not that the book's not great, but between the two, yeah, I'll take the movie all day long. He uses it as source material and does a great job with it. Also, notice all the books piled up around the living room where Wendy lives, and you realize that on top of probably being, very intelligent, she obviously reads a lot and doesn't have much going on there. And I know in Dr. Sleep, an explanation is given as to how you are basically absorbed into the hotel in your death, and everybody plays different roles there. You may not necessarily be who you were there in life, and I know that's the explanation they give, but long before that was given and it was up to the imagination, I used to wonder, obviously he recognizes Lloyd and knows him from his past, and I would love some kind of a backstory in that, and where Lloyd is from in his past as a bartender. Now, Horror Chat Matt, the big Stephen King reader, is going to hear this segment and probably call next week with everything I got wrong, or maybe what I misinterpreted. Just be gentle. I just watched Barbarians on Shudder from 2021, not to be confused with Barbarian from 2022. They're friends that have dinner over the sale of a house. Secrets are revealed, but before there is much, if any, confrontation, a home invasion ensues, and soon the friends are fighting for their lives. I thought this movie was very uneventful, and I give it 2.5 stars. Yes, quick review for a not-so-great film.
My gosh. Does that suck?
Where will we find the mummy?
Don't worry, the mummy will find you.
Hey, Doc, we got Grim Kim calling in with the Grim Facts.
Morning, Dark Mark. Morning, little Karis. Grim Kim, just checking in. Please do never feel beholden to posting these silly messages I leave, but I just love supporting and being part of the show. So anyway, I didn't have much to consider, but I was sitting here cracking myself up listening to rereading a comment I left on my Turner Classic fan site about my favorite movie of all time, Harold and Maude. And I wrote, I garner something new from watching this, my favorite movie at each stage in my life. Never did I ever think I would relate to Harold's mother. Here I am. God, dear God Almighty, help me. And it's like, it's so, so true. And it just got me thinking, and maybe we can do it more in the vein of horror itself. And some people may consider Harold and Maude a bit of a, well, it's certainly a dark comedy, quote unquote. What is dark comedy anyway? Okay, I digress. My question for you is, which movie is a perennial, perhaps favorite of yours that you like to watch over and over, or maybe you just have ended up seeing it over and over at different periods of your life, and each time you're like viewing it through a new lens because it's a different age and maybe a different perspective on things. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but the older I get, boy, I just root for those villains a little too much these days. Anyway, I would just love to hear if anyone has anything to throw in that vein there. And I hope you all have an amazing Thursday. Bye.
Thursday? My watch says Monday. Maybe she called and left that message on Thursday.
So, Grim, as far as parental horror or movies that I've seen over my lifetime at different ages, is one actually that you mentioned a week or so ago, The Bad Seed, okay, which is a fantastic film. When I was a kid, I found this very suspenseful. Great movie. That was when I was a kid. When I became an adult and had my own children, this movie became terrifying. The thought of one of my kids doing something so horrible with no remorse at all was like getting sucker punched in the gut. Literally almost makes you sick to your stomach, like as to how you would feel or what you would do or how you would handle something so horrendous. But yeah, The Bad Seed. And as far as evil children movies, of course you have the classic Village of the Damned, which is a great classic, black and white. But then there's Brooke Shields and Alice, Sweet Alice. Have you ever seen Alice, Sweet Alice? That's I want to say it was the 1970s. That's a pretty brutal movie. But another parental horror, and not so much that I've seen over the course of my life, and more in the true crime vein. And if you're into the true crime thing and real life horror, you've got to check out The Clove Hitch Killer from 2018. Now, this was based on the true story of the serial killer BTK, who is Dennis Rader. But it's more from a family perspective. It's basically like this kid's father is this horrendous serial killer, but is able to kind of pull off the, dad and, good dad image during the day, and at night he's basically stalking victims. Very troubling. And I guess the BTK's real life daughter, just had recently put a book out about how hard this was for her because she loved her dad so much and thought he was such a loving father, to find out that he was this horrendous guy. Always a pleasure to hear from you, Grim Kim. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Is this something you could share with the rest of us, Amazing Larry?
Well, Happy New Year, Dark Mark and Karis. Scary Larry here, and let's kick things off with my first watch of 2024. I decided last week to go and watch the new horror movie, Night Swim. Now, apparently, this was years in the making after writers Bryce McGuire and Rod Blackenhurst had a bit of an internet sensation when they released a 4-minute short of the same name 10 years ago. While I never saw the short, I'm betting they would have been better off sticking with the 4-minute video. So Night Swim is a typical family being haunted, only the home they bought isn't haunted, their pool is. Without spoilers, the pool in question turns out to be a natural spring-fed pool. This is somewhat important later. Now, Ray Waller was a Major League Baseball star who was forced into early retirement due to onset multiple sclerosis. He liked the neighborhood and thought the pool at this house would be therapeutic. One quickly realizes the pool is beyond therapeutic as it starts to heal his disease. But with the healing, it comes at a heavy cost. There's a couple of decent jump scares, weird background behind the pool that doesn't necessarily make sense. So I give this one 2.5 out of 5 stars. I'd recommend waiting for this to hit streaming services. Not a bad movie, just not a top 10 contender.
Two things you can always depend on is that most likely Scary Larry will see it first and will be brutally honest. Look, Larry, you don't got to twist my arm to wait for streaming. I'd do that even if the movie was good, because I don't get out to those expensive movies as much as I used to like to.
Nothing finer than a good old Scary Larry review.
Until next time, stay on the road, keep clear of the moors, and beware the moon. But most of all, be good to yourself. This is Dark Mark, signing off. See you soon.